everyone, and welcome to Tattva, the principles of investing. We have often seen a divergence between market return and investor return. The gap can often be attributed to what we call the investor behavior, and it's extremely critical to minimize this gap, if not eliminate it. In our previous series, Fundamentals, we have focused on various macro factors, both global and domestic, which have a role to play in our investment journey. However, all of these factors are outside our circle of control. What definitely is in our circle of control is how we respond to the plethora of information, news, and events which transpire in our investment journey. In this endeavor, we bring to you some of the finest and the most disciplined brains in the Indian investment fraternity. Today, I'm very happy to introduce our guest, Mr. Kalpen Parekh. Mr. Kalpen is the MD and CEO of DSP Asset Managers Pvt. He has over 19 years of experience across various firms in the industry. He is well known to be very unique, right from his visiting card to his personality. This is what draws him the maximum attention. Thank you, Kalpen, for joining in, and it is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you to the entire team at ZWest. Happy to be here.
So, sir, my first question to you is on the basic premise of investing, which is, the rule of compounding, which is not to interrupt it unnecessarily. According to a research, Olympic athletes only train for about 2 hours in a day, and out of this, only 4% of the time goes to high intensity training. 89% of the time goes to low intensity training, and the remaining goes in medium intensity. I would like to draw this analogy with investing as well. Often we have seen that normal returns, which are sustainable over a longer term, are more favorable to the investor than abnormal volatile returns. However, investors often get it wrong, and there is either a rush to book profits or to chase hot trends. What would you advise?
Megha, I think the answer to your question lies in your question itself. And you very beautifully said that, real wealth creation comes from time, which is compounding. And I think the enemy of compounding is interruption. And interruption to compounding comes through activity. And that activity could be buying wrong or even selling wrong at different points in time. Data world over the history of last 70, 80 years, wherever, markets have that type of history, highlights that while an asset class may give 10 to 11% long-term returns, but investors actually earn only 5 or 6% returns. And that is primarily due to higher activity or wrong activity. Our own example, we have been managing mutual funds since 96. We have now around 26 years of existence. Our oldest fund, it's called DSP FlexiCap Fund, has 26 years of vintage, around 19% CAGR, 94 times growth in NAV, meaningful 4-5% extra return over the benchmark. So it has everything that a consumer would ask for. But the one who invested in 96 wouldn't have known that 26 years later, this fund would have, done as well. And in this journey of 26 years, the fund has in few years delivered 100% plus returns. In few years has delivered moderate returns of 8-10%. In few years has fallen by 50 to 60% as well. And so that is the truth of markets and investing. Now, less than 26 investors have survived 26 years of all the ups and downs. And this data, as small as, less than 0.1% of the total base lasting long would be true for any mutual fund in the world. Investors don't last, unfortunately. They keep changing, queues. It's like you are waiting in a security line at an airport, and hoping that my line will go ahead. And we always feel that Bajuwala line is moving faster, so let me go there. Same is, when we are driving our car on a highway with traffic. So this temptation is a human temptation to constantly do something. And this is also a temptation which has been wired over millions of years of evolution. So most likely very difficult to overcome this temptation, and which is why it is almost going to be certain that only 5% investors, on earth will earn real compounding. 95% because of their misbehavior will create this behavior gap or the returns gap to benefit the 5% who truly, learn these principles. And honestly, these principles are known to all. They are too simple, actually. They are so simple that it's very difficult to follow because we feel that there's nothing exciting in these simple principles. So I think however much you as advisors wish this and we as money managers wish that we all demonstrate discipline and the right behavior of long-term compounding, we have always seen that our lives are, faced with daily stimulus. And in today's hyper-connected world of social media and data, coming together, we have minute-to-minute stimulus on everything about the world, whether it is, markets or asset classes or, central bank actions or what are different fund managers doing around the world. And at any point in time, different people are behaving differently. So there is a lot of confusion as well. Because when you are thrown with so many diverse points of information, how does your brain really respond? And especially people who are great professionals in their own domain, but who are not great professionals in investing, actually may think there is an illusion that I can learn very fast through WhatsApp messages and social media and other things. And so these are the real challenges. I wish I had an answer to solve for this. I do have an answer, but I do know that the answer is rarely embraced by most people because curbing activity is almost impossible. We can highlight to people. Now it's up to them whether they want to embrace it and be a part of 5% or be a part of 95%.
Very right, Kalpen, because it is not a win-win game. It is a win-lose game. And when people kind of react like this, it just adds more returns to the 5% people who are kind of responding and not reacting to situations. We can categorize people into two types, the intelligent ones and the smart ones. Now, the intelligent ones definitely get the technicalities right. And often they are kind of having a very high overconfidence bias, wherein, as you rightly said, that, there is a very high degree of illusion of knowledge, which often becomes very detrimental to the overall health of the portfolio. Now, investing often needs you to be smart and smarter more often than being intelligent. So how does one overcome this problem?
Megha, I think, more than intelligent and smart, I think what is required is to be, simple and follow principles which are sound. Ultimately, if you know what are the sound principles of making money, and then, you create a process or you automate your, approach to follow these sound principles, because many times what happens is sound principles don't work in the short to medium term at times. What is right to do for your long-term health of the portfolio and long-term wealth of your hard-earned money, there are three things which may be right to do, but in the near term, the right things are not necessarily working because markets don't always, align to the sound principles. Markets intermittently deviate from sound principles, and those are moments to keep faith. So according to me, what are the simple sound principles? There are only three. In 3 lines, I can try to articulate that. One is buy good companies or good investments, which basically wherever you're investing, whether it's an asset class, be in the right asset class, or within that asset class, be in the right choice of securities or funds or stocks. So basically buy good, at good prices. Now, a lot of stocks, bonds, asset classes may be good, but they may be overpriced. So if you buy them at expensive prices, you will again, deviate from sound principles. And the third sound principle is that invest for good, which is, length, which is time. So 3 rules: invest in good, invest at good prices, and invest for good. Good companies, good prices, long time horizons. These are the only 3 rules that will, really matter in a long period of time. Now, you can create structures or designs, and we try to do that as money managers. You try to do it through your portfolio construction approach, such that, we are able to only select the right companies or the right asset classes, and we eliminate. So today, if there are 5,000 companies in India, or let's say 3,000 companies in India between various market caps, our portfolios will have only around collectively not more than 150 or 200 companies. Because there is a massive amount of elimination. You don't have to go to every party to make money. You only narrow down to few good companies. Likewise, few good funds or fund managers who you may like. So that's the first tick mark. The second tick mark we follow is that even if, within our universe of good companies, there may be some companies which are so overpriced because they've become the darlings of market, they've become flavor of the season, they've become a fad of this cycle, that they again stretch in terms of their valuations or prices. So we generally try to, stay away from such pockets of expensive valuations. Likewise with asset classes, there are times asset classes become very expensive. For example, when interest rates go to 4% or 5% in India, long duration bonds is a wrong asset class to be in, because from those prices, generally next 3-4 years returns are not made. When stocks go to 70, 80, 100 P multiples, and if funds are over invested there, again you're buying great companies but at wrong prices. To give an example, companies like Infosys or Wipro, they are iconic companies of India who are, who created a mark for India globally as well. But between 2000 to 2015 or 2000 to 2010, some of them actually delivered zero returns, even if their businesses continued to grow, because in the year 2000, they were very expensive. The same happened with companies like L&T and Reliance and NTPC and all the, high profile capital goods companies or infrastructure companies, or diversified companies which are investing in energy and infrastructure between 2008 to 18, because in 2007 and 8 they had become massively overpriced. It happened with consumer companies in between. It happened with pharma companies from 2015 to 2022, where 2015 was such a euphoric bubble that even though these companies were dominant global companies, they were called the pharmacies of the world, but yet their stock prices did not go anywhere. So the second principle is equally important as much as the first principle. And the third one is that if you've got first and second right, then don't come in the way of compounding. Give it reasonably long periods of time. And as individuals, we have to also plan for our, long-term retirement, long-term goals. Or for rich people, it's not even about planning for goals. It's about just nurturing their wealth and not letting it get destroyed and passing it for the next generation, or using it for, other businesses or charity or many other things. So everywhere, time is a very valuable asset class or friend. So the third principle is give it time. So I think the way I think about these things is that I have my formula that I want to buy good. Thankfully, because of my nature of my work and regulations, I invest all my money in mutual funds. So whether it is DSP Mutual, I invest only in DSP funds as a rule. But wherever I would have invested, most mutual funds largely ensure that we buy good companies. I can't imagine any mutual fund would be buying the wrong company. So the good is sorted. Now, the second good is to not buy popular funds in a cycle, because many times when you buy popular funds, you are not respecting the second principle of buying at the right prices. You are ending up buying at very high past performance, which could be temporary or cyclical. And the third principle is in your hands, which is stay for long. And here, the way I have tried to do this hack is to not react. So every time I want to, get out of a fund where a lot of money has been made, or a lot of money, or the returns are very poor, I have now made a rule. I have a diary that I need to write down in the diary why I want to get out, and then wait for 7 days and then take that decision. Now, out of laziness, I'm neither able to write down, or even sometimes I've written down, but the patience of 7 days, deters me from acting then. So these small hacks help you. And then I invest in funds which are, which have a lot of guardrails of quality of businesses, valuations, and, volatility. So with those guardrails, don't create sharp fluctuation in my portfolios. I never get highest returns. I never get lowest returns. I'm very happy as an investor with an average 70% equity allocation, but I'm still able to earn returns closer to equity. So volatility is low. So this is my personal choice. I'm not saying this is an answer to everyone. This is the hack for me, that I don't want my NAVs to fluctuate sharply. I strongly believe in your first comment, Megha, that between choosing the highest return in a cycle versus the return which can remain for longest period of time, in the second decade of my career experience, I have moved to the second bucket. In the first decade of my career experience, when I was mature as well as immature, I was chasing the first bucket, try to chase the highest return. I learned that when I tried chasing the highest return, I actually earned high risk. Optically, illusionally, I used to think that I'm, seeking returns and I'm going to get returns. But the returns that I was seeking were already delivered in the past. And in the future, they actually converted into capital loss or risk. So I think the second vertical is difficult. That bucket is where competition is very less, because most people are trying to, play in the first bucket. So I rather be in an uncrowded space, and that suits me as my personality.
I think that's a very valid point and a great hack, and I'm sure I'm going to, also try to emulate that. This brings me to my next question, which is often in investments, as you rightly said, you have to invest for length. And it often needs you to have a very iterative mindset and, keep moving the goalpost as and when situations evolve, which keep evolving, obviously. This requires thorough research, or it requires you to do a lot of primary research as well, which is not very doable for most people. This often leads to selling winners too early or holding on to losers for too long, and the latter being more dominant than selling winners as well. How do we ensure we train our minds for this?
You know, every time you rebalance or you get out, typically you get money back and you have to take one more decision. Investing is, best outcomes are achieved in investing if your quality of decisions are good. And so quality of decision should be high and quantity of decision should be low. So if there are too many decisions to take, quality will get compromised and outcomes will get compromised. So I think one awareness of this is very important, that I don't want to take too many decisions. Charlie Munger has said that, ideally good, meditative, long-term patient investing should be such that you get a ticket with 20 holes in it in your entire lifetime, and you can punch it only 20 times. So every investment decision of entering or exiting a stock, either booking profits or loss in a stock, whatever is that decision, is like one punch, and you cannot punch more than 20 times in your entire lifetime. So let's assume if you're going to live for 80 years, once in every 4 years, you have to take a decision. And which is why, the hack that I have kept for myself is to note down my decisions, to write down my decisions, because writing puts pressure on me to be more objective about why am I taking this decision, and then what is the next alternative I'm going to do if I get out of something. Do I have a better alternative? Again, thankfully for people like us who invest in mutual funds, we get diversified portfolios within the same fund. So let's assume today I want to get out from equity because markets are valuation, and which is what my current belief is. I feel tempted or edgy to trim some profits because a lot of money has been made in the last 3 years. I want to take it out. Then I ask this question: if I take it out, there will be capital gains tax. I will pay some tax. I will lose compounding on that tax forever. And then if I take it out, where will I invest? Will I invest in bonds? Okay, I'll go to bonds. Again, now in the new tax regime, the tax efficiency of bonds has become very poor. Where else will I invest? If I take out from equity funds, I will go to debt funds or gold fund. Again, their tax efficiency is very poor. So I may save 5-10% of correction here, but I will end up paying the same in terms of tax on the other side. And then after 3 years, when I want to get that money back here, again, there will be tax. So what I have done as a hack again, and I'm using the word hack again and again because we need to create, some guardrails to our own behavior, to our own desire to act. So my guardrails are basically, I'm a very firm believer of hybrid funds in my portfolios, in my personal portfolio. So there is one bucket of mine, which is money forever, where I have now, prepared myself that come what may, even if it falls 50% or rises 100%, I'm not going to touch it, because for long term, you want some core allocation to be long term, so which will remain there. Then there is another allocation where you want to, rebalance depending on market cycles, sector cycles. That I have given it to more actively managed asset allocation funds within my portfolio, which will keep rebalancing. So if markets really go crazy and berserk, that fund will go all the way and, can reduce equity and bring it down. Or it will keep navigating from, sector to sector, depending on what is right at a point in time. Now, as long as I have confidence on the team or the person who is managing that money, that he is prudent and he is not going to, chase the fads, and he will keep navigating me with discipline. And over and above the person, there is a structure. A lot of our funds have a structure that, we have guardrails and boundaries that if valuations cross a certain threshold, it will move into bonds to a certain extent. If it crosses another certain threshold, it will move into global equities. If it crosses a certain threshold, it will go to gold. There are, formulaic automated structures and designs which give me comfort, or at least the illusion of comfort that, there is a good captain, good pilot who will navigate my plane in volatility. So let me not worry. Let me focus on increasing my salary and, increasing my savings. Let the structure and the fund manager take care of the navigation. Now, because some of these structures, and here I want to highlight the power of structures or design. I'll give you an example, and I'm not trying to sell any fund to you, but to make it, relevant. We have one fund where, on the equity component, when valuations are very high, we take put options. We buy put options, and we, in a way, prepare the fund for any sharp correction. It gets hedged. And there is a cost of buying this put option. The cost is roughly, let's say, 0.5, 0.7% in the whole year. But what it does is it mentally gives me the comfort that if there is a 15-20% price correction in the market and in this equity component, this 0.5% of extra cost will hedge me for that downside. Instead of me getting out, paying tax, again getting in with some timing loss, that loss will be much higher than this 0.5. So this is a design, and here the power of good design becomes important. Now, it may not necessarily give me the highest return. Let's say if my long-term equity portfolio earns X%, this portfolio may earn X minus 1, that 1% cost. But the comfort that it will not give me very sharp drawdowns enables me to stay put without even looking at that portfolio. To be honest, I've been investing in that strategy since 2016 in DSP when I joined. It's been 7 years. I've been investing in a similar strategy. I don't incrementally invest, but some of my old investments when I started my career in ICICI Prudential, there is a fund which was this similar fund was designed in 2002. Now, for 21 years, my money is in that fund. I have never looked at it because I know there is a design which will solve for my concern of volatility. And because I don't look at it, I have not interrupted the compounding. The biggest enemy of our long-term compounding is our interruption, our interference. So over time, and mind you, I'm not saying all of this right from day one. I am not born with these type of insights from day one. Between 98 to 2008, I have done everything that should not have been done as an investor. All wrong behavior, chasing past performance, every 15 days getting out of one fund, moving to another fund. And because you are working in a mutual fund, you have ability to just press few buttons and keep transferring. But someday, after 10 years, I realized that with so many transactions, the amount of unnecessary tax incidents, buying high, selling low, buying high, selling low, I've made such poor returns. What's the point? So gradually you realize stillness is important. And what brings stillness is, one, we have to keep ourselves busy with other things and not only with investing. And the second is to have structure so that you can stay away. The structure will safeguard the investment philosophy from your human intervention. So I'm a firm believer of, well-designed products, well-defined products. Whether they'll give me the highest return or the second highest return is a secondary outcome. Also here, the other important point that I've learned over time and inculcated in my mind is, I've always said that, let's say I invested in one of my funds 4 years back and, the CAGR is 16%. And in some other fund of mine, it is 20%. I'm invested in both the funds. This 16 and 20 is nothing but optical at this point in time, because I'm not going to take this money out. 20 years later, this 16 could go down to 12 also. The 16 could go to 18 also, depending on the day when I take the money out, whatever is the market environment. So looking at returns is completely futile, especially for investors who want to be invested for decades. Today's returns have no meaning. The only return that counts for an investor are two data points: your entry data point and your exit data point. All points in between are only to keep us busy and, to make us feel that I'm adding value. But every day's return has no meaning. Though, it is, and I am tempted to look at my returns every day because I look at my funds because I'm also a custodian of investors' money, other investors' money. But I'm very clinical in that it doesn't excite me. One of my fund has given great returns. It doesn't disappoint me. One of my fund has even given minus 5% intermittently, because I know both of these are temporary. My final return is going to be the last day on which I'm going to get out of these funds. And hopefully, if it is for the next generation, my son will do all this.
I think I totally subscribe to your idea of writing, and I must compliment you, for the extensive investment philosophies your fund managers write, and which are extremely good data points that we often read and understand from. Now, you've made a very interesting point that you are all right with, normal returns over a longer period in time. However, we often come across investors who kind of get extremely influenced by social media, by financial influencers, so on and so forth, in order to chase supernormal return. They do not probably understand the risk associated with it, or the fact that it is very temporary in nature, and it doesn't make sense to do something which you do not understand. So, in a world of information overload, how does one stay realistic?
I think how to be realistic again will come from knowledge. As investors, we have to choose what is real, right knowledge, what is the real truth, and the truth cannot be too many, and the truth cannot keep changing every day. When you study, markets around the world, so there are some markets like ours which have 40-year history. There are some markets which have 70, 80, 90-year history. The developed markets have longer history. Now, when you study these data points, and we very recently had published some numbers, that the real rate of return, and ultimately as investors, what we should care for is the real rate of return. Over and above inflation, what is that extra return I'm making? Because why are we investing? We are all investing finally to fight our biggest enemy, which is inflation. We want the purchasing power of our money to grow. So when we looked at data around the world, different economies and countries have different rates of inflation. So comparing our 10% return to USA 10% return is not right, because currencies are different, underlying inflation rates are different. So the real rate of return for most successful countries and markets has been between 5 to 6%. So long-term US for a US American investor, after inflation they earn 6% more if they've stayed invested. Actual investor return will be far lower, but the market has given 6% real return. Likewise, India has been a blessed market, at least in this cycle in the last 10-15 years. Our real rate of return after inflation also is around 5 to 6%. But many other markets, the real rate of return fluctuate between 2% to 4% also. Now, with that data point, broadly, what you know is that, the real rate of return that you can earn from an underlying market or asset class varies from 3% to 6%. And that in a way then guides you that what can long-term return be, what can be the boundary conditions of your return, and anything which is promising higher or very low, both are outliers, both will not last for long. Outlier high returns also will go away, outlier low returns will also come back. There is this nice story where a king had asked one of his minister that every day morning I want you to remind me of one universal truth which will last forever. So this advisor of his, minister of his, said that he made a ring for him, and on that ring he inscribed 4 words: "This too shall pass." And he told the king that in good times look at this ring in the morning, and in bad times also look at the same ring. The same is true for investing, because investing has huge cycles. Particularly equity investing is cyclical, because the worst return in a single year in any country of the world has been minus 60% or minus 70%, but temporary. Eventually, it mean reverse. The best return also in a single year has been around 100 to 140%, but it does not last for long. But what are the median returns for equity as an asset class? It varies from 8% to 14%, depending on country to country, cycle to cycle. So 8 to 14, take an average is 11%. उसमें से inflation हटा दो 6% का, तो real return comes back to 5. Look at a third lens. What is the long-term return typically most countries have given, markets have given, is basically the return on equity. So whatever is the return that your capital invested will earn over a long period of time is what you as shareholder will earn. So if the ROE of India, ROCE of India is roughly between 13% to 16%, that is the broad range of return I should get, provided I don't overpay for that asset class. So once in a while, once in 7-8 years, markets become very euphoric, valuations, rise to 25-30 times. Even if you buy something at 22-25 times, that 13% ROE will not give you 13% return. You will actually earn less than that because you are overpaying for that. So what's important is not to overpay, and then you learn that either the real rate of return or the ROE of that country. Now, I know that in India, the ROE has fluctuated and averaged to around 14%. So I know that this is a reasonable rate of return. So whenever my last 5-year rolling return is 6 or 7%, I know that this is time, some point in time, the mean reversion will happen. Incrementally, I will earn higher so that I come back to 14. Whenever my last 5-year returns have been 25% or 22%, I know that again mean reversion will happen and these returns have to come down. So setting this fair expectation is a very important job. Most investors cannot do this on their own because the frameworks to guide them towards this truth is something they don't know it easily. They don't track it easily. It's not their day-to-day job. They are great engineers. They are great doctors. They are great coders. They can be great actors, but this is not the type of study they do versus that the study they do is something very different, right? And that's where I always tell people that, before you think of being a good investor, find a good advisor for yourself. Because this is not a game where with wrong skills or wrong illusions you can really win. You need hand-holding of credible advisors who have done this homework for you and who can then personalize your portfolio depending on your context. Many times I am asked, tell me which is the best fund to invest. And I tell these people that It is like, you waking up in the morning and telling me which is the best flight to take. And there are like 20,000 flights in a year, in a day around the world. Now, how do I tell you which is relevant to you? So there are so many other questions to answer before you decide what is right to do. And I think that's where, how do you do it? Either you study a lot, you spend time studying on, studying the right data, the right information, learn from the right people in that industry. In every industry, there are, hundreds of professionals. And in every industry, only 5% typically are, either competent or go right. Everywhere there is that 80-20 principle. So then identify who are the right people to talk to learn from, who are, prudent, who are honest, who will give you a very balanced perspective. And then, over time, you can form these opinions. When I started my career in 98, 99, the 1 year return of the funds that we were recommending was 80%. Now, the lesson that I learned in that year was 80% return is for good. मतलब हर साल मिलते रहेगा. And in the third year, the same fund fell by 87%. Remember, a 100 rupee, a 20 rupee NAV fell by some 90. It came down to some 2.5 rupees in a matter of just 1.5 years. Now the lesson again I learned. I thought अभी नया lesson सीख लिया कि equity में कभी पैसा नहीं बनेगा. So go and invest in bonds. So I invested in government bond funds, and they went up because interest rates were falling. I earned 18%. So the third lesson I learned is gilt fund में 18% बनता है. Now imagine every year you earn new and wrong lessons. So only after 8-10 years you realize that big picture क्या है, or, what are the boundary conditions. So I always ask this question that what are long-term returns? What are median average returns? We are all average people. हमको average return ही मिलने आता है. Super normal returns के लिए we have to behave very differently.
A very candid reply, Kalpen. And, we also understand that, you said 5% of the money manager, 5% of the investment advisors are to be relied upon. And the reason why we do these kind of sessions is so that people like you who are in the 5% segment, we can take out to our investors and they can understand the philosophies of investing. Now, Kalpen, my next question is something which you have alluded to in first two answers, but I would still want to reiterate because this is a very important concept. And this is about the boring nature of long-term investing. We do understand that compounding requires inaction. It's not a sport. And the idea here is not to minimize boredom, but to maximize risk-adjusted return for long term. Now, the problem is that simplicity as a concept is extremely underrated, and it's very difficult for a lot of investors to subscribe to. So how do we fix that?
Harsh, if I had answers by now, we would have fixed most of them. The fact is that we don't have so many answers. And maybe there are simple answers, but simplicity is not only underrated, but is at times unwanted because it is too simple. It does not excite you. I have, many large investors who say that in last 5-6 years, I realized that either उधर सब हाथ पैर मार लिया, finally index fund के आसपास ही return मिलता है. Whether I go and invest in a smart PMS manager or a smart mutual fund manager, a lot of you give us good stories. We go and invest everywhere. फाइनली इंडेक्स को भी बीट करना मेरे लिए मुश्किल हो गया है. सो आई टोल्ड हिम, फिर भी आप क्यों हमें मिलते हो, फिर भी आप क्यों, और तो ही सेज कि अगर आपको आपके फंड में इन्वेस्ट नहीं करेंगे तो एक्साइटिंग डिस्कशन कैसे कर पाएंगे. यू गाइस कम एंड गिव अस स्टोरीज अबाउट पीएलआई में क्या हो रहा है, चाइना में क्या हो रहा है, सेमीकंडक्टर्स में क्या हो रहा है. सो ये नॉलेज लेने के लिए आई हैव टू इन्वेस्ट इन ऑल दीज फंड्स. बट इज दैट नॉलेज रियली हेल्पिंग माय लॉन्ग टर्म रिटर्न्स? बट सो ही वाज वेरी ऑनेस्ट टू हाईलाइट दैट. So simplicity, while it is important, but somehow we don't embrace it. And again, I will tell you only what I have done and what has worked for me. I don't know if it is universal, but I do think it is universal. My approach is very simple. I say, I look for diversifying my portfolios, because when I diversify my portfolios, I am making the first assumption that I don't know the future, and that is a very big universal truth. I am, more confident about my ignorance than I am confident about my knowledge, because the amount of knowledge I have is 0.00001% of the real knowledge that exists in the world on many dimensions. And history has shown that, for 20, 30, 40 years, some countries continue to make great returns and some countries continue to, give zero returns. So, my assumption that one country will make the best return, how do I know? That country also does not know. So I start with that first premise that the future is unpredictable, unknowable. Now, with that background, then am I being pessimistic to say don't invest? No. What I'm saying is, one, be aware that you can't forecast the future, and hence invest And then I apply the second rule that this too shall pass. So invest in a way where most of the bad news is there in the price. So even any further bad news comes, your downside is reasonably controlled. And the third approach I try to keep is so for the first 10-12 years of my investing career, I used to always ask this question that where will I make more money? And accordingly, I would choose funds. Now the question I ask over the last 10-12 years is, where will I not lose money? What I realize is that this third question has made a big impact in my portfolio construction decision and actually has improved my returns, my portfolio returns significantly. Because, when you start by asking where will I not lose a lot of money, because most of the bad news is there in the price or, the valuations are, comfortable in that asset class. Generally, any unknown future development acts as a positive surprise. So what you have to do in portfolio construction is to try to eliminate the impact of negative surprises. If there is a negative surprise, your purchase price should be reasonably low enough that the negative surprise cannot create a big knock on your portfolio. So what I'm saying is ultimately, our portfolio, it's like going to war and you need a sword to kill inflation. You also need a shield to kill volatility. Because if you don't have a shield in your journey when you're fighting a battle, however strong you are as a warrior, someone else's sword can, even if for a second it cuts you, you are out of the game. So the whole game is about lasting long. And to last long, safeguards are important. Safety nets are important. And safety nets come from diversification sensibly and thoughtfully and not recklessly. So my approach is, diversify reasonably across a few asset classes which are low, which are not, moving always in the same direction, but which have some inherent value for investing. It's not that you diversify just for the heck of it in an asset class which will generally never in the long term make returns. So you diversify sensibly. So my approach is that in the long term, equity is the best asset class. So dominant part of the portfolio has to be equity. Within equity, I come from a school of thought that you should diversify both in India and outside because, I don't believe that it is countries which will make money. It is companies which will make money. Good companies will make money and good companies are available in India as well as outside India. And then after that, the second condition that the price you pay should not be very high. So today, when I expand my universe of opportunities to Indian companies and global companies, I'm getting best of both. I'm getting ability to choose at right prices. Now, the second principle is equities make a lot of money in the long term. Equities are also volatile. So now I want to solve for volatility. So how do I solve for volatility? Then I look back at history that every time equities have been extremely volatile on the downside, it has fallen by a sharp percentage or it for 4 or 5 years has given zero returns. Actually, between 93 to 2003, our markets gave zero return for 10 years. Between, I think, 2001 to 2010, US markets gave zero returns for 10 years. And no one would have wanted to invest in a developed world because all the growth was perceptibly in emerging market. And in the next decade, China gave zero return and US gave the best return. So again, that first thesis that the future is unknowable. So coming back, equity has return, so I allocate more. But equity has volatility, so I want safety. And in periods when equity is volatile, generally I have observed that bonds and gold have protected. So I will say, okay, I need to have some component in bonds and gold also, but not as high as equity because expected return of equity, median return of equity is generally better than fixed income and gold. Just to give you some statistics, again, over 25 years of data available in India, median return of Nifty is around 12%, median return of gold is around 11%, median return of bonds is around 7 to 8%. So that's the pecking order. So my ratio also gets allocated in that component. And then within that, whatever in the current point in time has last 5-year returns much lower than the median return, I will overweight there. And has much higher than the median return, I will slightly underinvest. So this is a crude formula I have designed to create portfolios with slightly or meaningfully lower fluctuation. So if when markets fall 50%, if my portfolio is down only 15% or 20%, I don't feel like jumping out of the train and giving up the turning point of the market because in the next 2 years generally markets are up 100%. But if you get out, you can't get that 100% upside. Then only in fact sheet charts you see market ne itna return banaya, but your money is sitting in bonds and gold at the wrong time. So which is why my approach is to integrate these two in these 3-4 asset classes in my own way or through combined portfolios. Historically, I would do it on my own. because it gives me some, ego kick that I can do it on my own. In recent times, I've started doing it in integrated portfolios, single funds, because then the tax efficiency goes up. And more so after this year's tax changes, I prefer doing this via a single fund itself, so that the formulas take care of this design. So coming back, length will come. So there is a very counterintuitive point that stocks on the highest return in the long term, but they are equally volatile. Hence, add bonds and gold to your portfolio. Hence, that reduces your returns, but it also reduces your fluctuation. Hence, that increases your time horizon of compounding, and hence you actually end up earning better absolute return. So, the learning I've had over so many years is that to increase your returns from equity, invest in other asset classes also, because it is those other asset classes which will help you in bad periods, so that you stay put in equity and get that compounding right.
Kalpen, you mentioned a word called pessimism, and my next question is about that, because it's not just an investment framework, but in our personal life also, when we have both pessimistic and optimistic scenarios, we generally get tilted toward pessimism. And there are a lot of doomsday reports also, which we keep coming across. And maybe they are because of some vested interest, but one gets tempted to take action based on pessimism, and generally optimism is left alone on its own. So how do we fix that issue?
Harsh, my learning and observation has been that generally as human beings, we tend to misbehave both in times of optimism and pessimism. And let me again answer this with data and not just with anecdote. If you plot the last 30 years of market history of just equity as an asset class, and typically the best returns are made when markets are very cheap and the environment is pessimistic. Why are they cheap? Because there is pessimism around. So actually, you have to invest in pessimism. And the worst returns are made when the past returns are very high, but the future returns are very poor. Typically, that happens in phases of euphoric optimism. So these are the two extremes. And then in the middle, so markets spend roughly 1/3 of time in each bucket of pessimistic phases, which are actually the best time to invest, of rational phases where you don't have either pessimism or optimism. We are chugging along. That is again 1/3 of the time, and there you make reasonable moderate returns. And then the third bucket is bucket of high optimism, where generally future returns are very poor. Now, when you look at data, we have seen data of flows. 2% money gets invested in periods of pessimism. 80% money gets invested in periods of optimism. So both sides people are misbehaving. When it is time to invest more, we are putting only 2% flows have come in that period. When it was time not to invest a lot more, 80% flows came. So 80% of all flows of last 25 years have come in periods of optimism. So actually, as human beings, we misbehave on both sides. And hence, having those guardrails and structures pre-facto is very important. And secondly, pessimism also sounds intelligent. And on the other hand, optimism sounds heroic. Right. So today, and I've tried this social experiment myself. There are days when I tweet positive stuff. In today's environment, that tweet gets 5x more likes. Then, on the same context, I will tweet something with data and rational thing, which is slightly, more balanced. So balanced comments, get less likes today versus optimistic comments. So I think as investors, we have to always say that we need to be real, we need to be rational. And every single day, there are enough equal reasons to be optimistic as well as pessimistic. And with the philosophy that I have, I really don't know the future. I hope for optimism. I hope that all is well, 10, 20, 30 years from now. I also at the same time every day realize that, when I start from work and it takes me 90 minutes to reach office, as bad as Bangalore and the roads are so bad, that also keeps me grounded, that don't get carried away. It also gives me optimism that करने के लिए बहुत है, देश के लिए बहुत काम है करने के लिए, growth भी बहुत होगा, और as investors also hopefully we will benefit. But the same, so I can post a picture of a road with pothole and I can convey optimism as well as pessimism. But both are the real truths of the country. That एक ठीक से ढंग से मुंबई में रोड भी नहीं बन सकता है because इतना corruption है. On the other hand, there's so much more to do. And so much growth to come. And both are the truths. So I don't need to take sides. Investing is not about taking sides. Investing is about balance. And then asking this question that is the good news priced in today in the market? Then let me underinvest in that asset class. Or is the bad news very, extensively embraced by the market? Then that also will change. And that's how you try to think about portfolio construction.
Glass half full versus glass half empty.
Just last comment on that. On that glass
Yes.
half full or empty, my view is that I don't want to comment वो half full या empty है. What I want to comment on is इसमें पानी है और मुझे प्यास
Right.
लगी, मुझे पानी पीना है. So focus on what matters to you, not in terms of taking a side कि आधा खाली आधा भरा हुआ है.
Absolutely. So being objective and being focused on your circle of influence, I think that's what matters. So Kalpen, with this, we come to the end of our discussion. And my last question is a little sensitive. You keep on mentioning about teaching next generation about the virtues of money. You have spoken about it. You have written about it. But with the way structures are changing, families are becoming more affluent, number of children per family are reducing. So in this kind of a scenario, parents in an urge to provide better environment, make life very, very simple and comfortable for the next generation. And we see the world of instant gratification all around us. Now, in this complicated environment, how do we ensure that the next generation value monies, and how does it work out in the overall scheme of things?
So this is outside my area of skill, and I wish I can be a good father to my son to give him both values as well as wealth creation formula. But thankfully, I'm blessed to have a kid who is grounded, and I think it is our conduct which will determine. You can't tell the next generation what to do. You have to show them by doing what is right to do. And people learn more. Kids learn more from observation than from verbal cues. So demonstrating that in behavior is very important. Also, the power of motivation is important. So if I'll give you my own simple techniques. So I make my son do an SIP. I've created a birthday SIP for him. So there is an installment that goes on 10th of every month because his birthday is on 10th. So I've created some association with a very special day of my life and his life. And broadly he knows कि इस तारीख को मेरे लिए कुछ अच्छा build हो रहा है. I try and tell him that you want to take a cricket bat. These are the 3 bats. We have sorted for quality. Let's not compromise on quality. Out of 20 bats, these are the 3 that are very good in quality. They will all 3 deliver the same outcome. एक 8,000 का है, एक 6,000 का है और एक 5,000 का है. Which one should we choose? And there is an incentive that if you choose the one which is 6,000 or 5,000, the saving again will go back into giving you something or buying something for you in the future. So the thought of value investing comes from here, that quality is being intact. Don't overpay. Don't overpay just because it is a brand, just because उसपे किसी अच्छे brand का sticker लगा है, because हमको खेलने से मतलब है, वो sticker क्या फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. So I think there are enough examples in day-to-day life to so these days he is into fitness. नया अभी college join हुआ है, so he wants to probably किसी ने बोला होगा we like lean and mean physique. So he's more into fitness. So I tell him that if you save something here, I will buy you something more for your fitness. And so I think it's about creating incentives for them aligned to what they like to do, but also marrying it with what is right to do. I think if we are able to blend these two together and personally also demonstrate that, hopefully the next generation also will value the role of saving more and discipline and behaving right.
It's very interesting. I mean, this is the first time I'm able to understand value investing so easily through the example of which bat to purchase, and that too for a teenager. And you were saying that you're not expert in that, but I think your answer proves it otherwise. So thanks, Kalpen. With this, we come to the end of our discussion, and this discussion has been very enriching on a lot of fronts. Be it about understanding who is the enemy of compounding and its interruption, be it about 5% of the investor earning real compounding versus 95% who pay the cost of that. Being simple is more important than being smart and intelligent. Simplicity is not just underrated, but unwanted. And being confident about your ignorances rather than being confident about your knowledge, because the knowledge is going to be very, very limited. And lastly, I think the punchline from this conversation is that it's not the countries which give return, it's the companies which give return. Thank you so much for taking out time from your busy schedule and helping our investors understand behavioral finance, understand them, the finer nuances of how to invest, what to look at. And from your own experiences, when you say things, I think this has a much larger impact. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Harsh, Anish, and Megha. Thank you so much.